I'm Margaret Sabey, born Lee Ford, and I was born in Southampton in 1928. My father was a company secretary for the Ford Motor Company, and my mother had been the secretary. And it was in November, on November the 12th, and a Saturday afternoon when I was able to come out of the nursing home with my mother, but we had to wait until the football match, Southampton playing at the Dell, was over because my father was a steward there. We lived in Cobden Gardens in Southampton and lived there for 9 years until 1939 when we moved to Bitton, West End, just outside Southampton.
Do you remember when you first heard about the war breaking out? How old were you?
Yes, we were, I was 9, 10 then. I just won a scholarship to Southampton Grammar School, and there were rumours of the war because I can remember my father pickling eggs in the bath upstairs to make sure that we had some eggs to eat if the war came. And we were in the process of buying this new house. But we didn't move there until the end of 1939. By that time, the school I was going to, which was Southampton Grammar School for Girls, was evacuated to Bournemouth. And we were evacuated on about the 3rd, 4th of September. We gathered at the school in the big hall there, and with a packed suitcase, gas masks, and a bar of chocolate we were given. And we were there and went into buses to the Southampton Central Station, where we went to Bournemouth. The chocolate was opened on the way, and it was a great treat to have such a large bar of chocolate just to yourself. And when we got to Bournemouth, we were then gathered in a hall in Old Christchurch Road, just by the synagogue. And it was quite a large hall, and one by one, children were taken away by their future foster parents and put into different homes. My brother had come with me, and we were one of the few couples, a brother and a sister, so that we were left rather till the end. We finally were taken by somebody, and it was just near Bournemouth Central Station, in a very small little cottage, station workers' cottages at the back. And it was such a different sort of house that we weren't used to at all. And whilst we were there for just a week, we were then moved to another house in the same sort of area, but slightly better. It had been a boarding house, a guest house, and the lady there was called Mrs. Smithers, and she smoked a lot, and although she had white hair, it was orange in the front where she smoked a lot. But we were there for a short while, and after that, because my brother was having, difficulty with the schools and so on, he wasn't with his own school, we were split up. He went and joined the rest of his schoolmates when over at Corfe and I moved into another house, which also had been a boarding house, where the landlady took in a number of girls from the same school. And we were there for a while. But this was a boarding house that I think they charged 8 shillings a week for the evacuees, but some of the parents gave a bit more because it was a bit more superior to quite a lot of the houses. Then it was Christmas time and time to go home for the holidays and into our new house, there were just 2 new houses had been built on an estate which had been an old house, and so there were lovely, you know, fields and trees and river to climb over, and it was really an outdoor sort of living place. But the new house was fine, except that there was trouble with the chimney. And so the first Christmas it smoked back at us a lot, and we had to have it altered again. But after that it was all right and kept the house nice and warm.
But what was it like going home just for Christmas, knowing that you were going to be evacuated back to this boarding house?
You don't think ahead like that. You, at that age, 10 or 11, you just do what grown-ups tell you. And you're taken here, you're pushed there, do this, you do that. School was good because we, first of all, shared the school with the Southampton Grammar School for Girls, which was at the Lansdowne, and because it was, we did half a day, and then the other school did half a day. We alternated between mornings and afternoons, and when we had afternoons off, we went quite a lot to the pavilions where we saw ballet and opera, and it really was, you know, quite a good experience in some ways. We also part of a school choir and gave concerts at the pavilion. Then there we managed to get a house on the Overcliff at Boscombe, because it was Wentworth School for Girls, which was a private school, and they were evacuated to Wales. So we took that over, and that was fine because it had lovely grounds, and although some of the classrooms were small because they had been sort of like dormitories, and we were a larger school than they were, we settled there for the rest of the war.
Tell me a little bit more about the first 2 houses that you went to then. Who looked after, like when you and David were both there? What was that like? And the second
Well, that was all right because it was...
Why did you stay there such a short time?
Well, the first one, the school didn't think it was appropriate. It wasn't good, you know, of good enough standard. The second one was a boarding house. And again, that's when David and I were together, but we were divided up then, you know, because he went to a school at Corfmullen where his own school had been evacuated to. But the billet that he had there was so awful because there was another boy from his school there, and the people who had it also had a son of their own, but if they had rice pudding, the son would have jam on his. But David and his friend didn't have anything on it at all. And when my parents went down to see him one day, he said, "Can you take me home if this is dreadful?" And so he went home. And he eventually went to St Mary's College, which was a Catholic boys' school just near where we lived, so that was very convenient for him. And he was there until he left at 16, 17 and went into the Navy.
So that's why he went home before you?
Oh yes, a long
Because
time. He wasn't evacuated.
He just persuaded them that it was so awful that they
Yes,
had to have
exactly.
him at home. So why don't you think they took you home at the same time then?
Well, because the school that I'd won a scholarship to was, and I really had no reason to want to go home. It was a good school certainly, and I enjoyed it then. I liked it, and I had a number of billets after that one in Carlton Road, where because my father died that year, Mother couldn't afford to pay any extra for me, so I was moved then, went to Ensbury Park to that was a flat downstairs, and the father was a fireman and the mother had a small boy of about 2 years old, but then she was expecting another baby, so they didn't have the space, so I moved then to Southbourne Road, and that was all right. There were two other girls there from the school. We used to walk to school from there. And but then the lady's mother came to stay with them, so there wasn't room. So then I moved further down the road to, I think this was 45 Southbourne Road. And it was a lady there who also had a sort of a boarding house, but not really during the war. There was a lady there who was blind and deaf, so we talked to her in sign language. She had two boys of her own about my age there who were at school. Her father, no, her husband was a pilot, but in a civilian capacity, and he was out in Jerusalem, so he was out in the Middle East. And we got on very well, because by this time I was about 15, 16, and she used to take me to whist drives and do dances and things, and there were a number of, you know, sort of social gatherings, beetle drives and things like that. And of course there were a lot of American servicemen, service people about the place, so it was just, you know, good for dancing. And then by that time, the war, it was D-Day, and I can remember being at home for D-Day, so it must have been sort of half-term, and the road outside our house, which was a main road into Southampton, was absolutely packed with army lorries, and in the field next to our house, a camp kitchen had been set up by a couple of English soldiers, a black American who was our first black American that we saw, and two other Americans. And they used to come into the house and have a bath and things like that. And one morning we woke up, this was just at the beginning of June, and all these, you know, lorries outside, and they piled into the, you know, camp kitchen next door, and they came into our house, and they just fell asleep everywhere, or they had a bath, or they, you know, sang songs and things. And then the next day they were all gone, it had all disappeared. That was amazing.
And where was that? Which house were you in?
That was in West End, you know, sort of between Bit and West End.
Oh, when you'd gone back home?
Yeah, there was a half terms. That's
Right.
why it was sort of, you know, I happened to be there. But shortly after that, the whole school returned to Southampton because the troops were no longer occupying our school. Because Southampton Grammar School for Girls had been built just before the war, new one, as had the boys' King Edward School. And they were both built about the same time. They were brand new, and they were taken over by troops during the war.
But you moved to Corfmullen yourself, didn't you?
No,
that was
didn't.
David.
No, it's just David.
What was your thoughts when you first heard that you were going to be evacuated? You were at school, or did your mum tell you?
Well, we were in Hinckley when the war broke out, and it was a Sunday when the announcement was made, and we were staying with a cousin of ours and an uncle and aunt who had they ran the Conservative Club in Hinckley, and we'd just gone out to get the Sunday papers, and I can remember coming back and how quiet the streets were. There was not a sound about. And when we came back, they told us that, you know, there had been this announcement on the radio. Our parents were away on holiday in Devon, North Devon. It was the first holiday they'd had alone together, you know, by themselves. And so we went back to Southampton, and then we got school uniforms together and everything else, and then we're off almost the next day.
So it was that quick? You don't
It
remember
was that
actually
quick.
Somebody announcing to you that you were
No.
going to be evacuated?
No, it was just, we'd go to the school, go that. These plans must have been put in place a long time before, because most of the schools in Southampton weren't evacuated until after Christmas. and ours was the first one, and I think it was